Fantastic. Great. Thank you very much. Hello.
That's why. No, I have to entertain you with a story or something.
Okay. Please, make yourselves comfortable. So just for all of you in the room, if you didn't know already, there will be a reception immediately after this event, which you're all welcome to join. There is a slight logistical issue with that, in that you'll need some buggies to get there, but I can assure you that it's definitely worth it. And yeah, you're more than welcome to join us immediately after this event, which we're hoping to conclude before 8 o'clock. We are just waiting for our last panelist to make his way over. As you can imagine, there's a lot of security cordons up on the ground today. I'm sure you're all familiar with that as well, so probably navigating those as we speak, but it's due any moment now. Okay. All right. All right. Mr. Nabil Munir, who we're waiting for, requires a little bit more time to get here. But why don't we get started? And firstly, it's great to see a great turnout in this room today as we mark 10 years of the Warsaw International Mechanism on Loss and Damage. I guess yesterday's historic agreement by parties on the Loss and Damage Fund and funding arrangements to operationalise those. This event takes place in the context of that and the backdrop of that, which I think is a very important moment and a great moment of jubilation and rapturous applause. And I'm sure we'll be hearing more about that over the course of our discussion today as well, about how we got here. But let's start. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, friends. It's great to have you in this room today, and it's great to see a packed turnout today as well. You're joining us today for the high-level event on the 10th anniversary of the Warsaw International Mechanism for Loss and Damage at COP28. My name is Shiv Vashisht. I am the team lead for content at the UN Climate Change Secretariat. So my background is very much communications. And, you know, loss and damage story, as we know, has been 30 years in the making. And it's a really fascinating story to be told, as illustrated by some of the pictures that we've seen today. As you've been entering the room, you might have had the chance to see a slideshow being projected onto the screens. At SB 58, the Executive Committee of the Warsaw International Mechanism launched a call for entries for this photo exhibition entitled Loss and Damage in Focus, 10 Years of the Warsaw International Mechanism. And what you've seen on screen are the photographs that the Executive Committee has received in response to this call. I mean, very evocative, inspiring photos, which I think capture the very many emotions that come when we think of loss and damage. So these showcase stories of individual and communities on the front lines of climate change and their responses to loss and damage. And these stories are a very apt background to our high-level event today, as we'll be reflecting on the progress undertaken by the mechanism over the last decade and the vision for the mechanism going forward. I'd like now to pass the floor to Mr. Mohammed Al-Sharifi. He is a representative of the COP28 presidency, and we're very happy to have you here today, Mr. Al-Sharifi. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Shir. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Mohammed Al-Sharafi. I'm from the CAP 28 team. I'm the lead negotiator on loss and damage. First of all, I'd like to welcome you all in the United Arab Emirates, and I would like you to have the opportunity to squeeze a little bit of fun in the United Arab Emirates in the next busy days. I know Dubai has a lot to offer, but hopefully we'll give you time to do so. I'd like also to thank the WIM for giving me the opportunity here to share this special event with you. And with that, I think yesterday was a great day for all of us. We saw how the loss and damage, adoption of the loss and damage decision was a great win for all of us. And not only just the adoption of the decision in the opening day, but we see the pledges coming over, and we are hearing also more of the pledges coming over. This is a great positive momentum for all of us. And we also need to remember that the Santiago network, I see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I hope that we will see also the Santiago network up and running soon after. Both of them are going to complement each other. But let's remember where they started. They started from engaging in a platform like the Warsaw International Mechanism, with sharing knowledge, sharing experience. This has led to all the other stuff. Of course, I'm going to say something that I truly believe in. Our founding fathers really believed in the power of sharing knowledge and benefiting from one another. This is how our country was built. And this is also tells us that when we share with each other, we can build great things. Each country, each community, each individual has a lot to offer. And it's only waiting for a platform where it can put everything together. If I recall, many of the things I see in the Warsaw International Mechanism, they creep in and they influence the negotiation of the Santiago network, and they influence the decision of the loss and damage fund. Everything integrated together. And at the end of the day, we finally see some of the result, and we'll continue seeing the result hopefully in the next few years. Of course, this needs the total collaboration from all of us. I remember also I learned a lot in this journey. I learned listening from the indigenous communities, listening also from the great experience the Philippines has to offer when facing hurricanes. And all this came together in the Warsaw International Mechanism. And all this, you see the fruits of it here. I remember also one of the great people I met in this process is Ambassador Adaw. I don't know if he's here or not, but maybe you can send my regards to him. And I thought he said something in Bonn that resonated well with me, that WIM is the policy arm of the loss and damage. The Santiago network is the technical arm, and the loss and damage fund is the financial arm. They all have to integrate together so that we get the maximum value out of it. With this, I thank you again for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Al-Sharafi, and also congratulations on bringing us this far yesterday as well. So now I'd like to pass the floor to Mr. Yusuf Nassif. He's the Director of the Adaptation Division at the UNFCCC Secretariat. Dear Yusuf, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Shiv, and thank you very much, Mohammed, for being here, and really congratulations for this amazing achievement yesterday, which broke the mold of our COPs. Now, we've always anticipated that all these important decisions have to wait till the very last minute, and with the added benefit that we should adopt it while everyone is half asleep and stressed and and so tired and delayed, etc. But here, we've shown that, hey, this mold doesn't have to be what should be the case every time. So we have a decision that has broken that mold, was adopted on the very first day and achieved an unprecedented speed of mobilization of resources. I just came from the GST Adaptation Roundtable, and the pledges kept coming while we were there. So, I mean, I am as positively shocked as everyone else that this has worked well, and thanks to the presidency for making it happen. Now we're celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Warsaw International Mechanism for Loss and Damage, and there is cause for celebration. When one looks back at the context we were at 10 years ago, it was very different. There was a certain taboo status associated with the context of loss and damage. And not to reveal my age, but I do recall also the OSIS proposal from '91. And back then, not only loss and damage was well, practically a non-existent piece of terminology, but even adaptation was being seen negatively at the time as an escapist approach to climate action, so a distraction away from mitigation. So when one sort of compares where we are now versus where we are there, you see this massive change in mindset in dealing with climate impacts and in how we respond to them. But having also been involved with this particular work stream since day one, I'm seeing three major paradigm shifts that have happened due to the work of the ExCom and the WIM. One is how it catalyzed cross-disciplinarity and a cross-stakeholder platform in ways that we never had before. So in dealing with displacement, in comprehensive risk management, in non-economic losses, in slow onset events, and of course the action and support part, it has integrated so many different disciplines that have never before existed under the same umbrella, and enabled a new discourse that got us to advance our understanding of loss and damage, and I think through modalities that serve as a very good model for others to follow. Another sort of corollary of this is that it has, as a result of this discourse and enabling multiple stakeholders to become part of this, it has catalyzed the creation of institutional setups that probably wouldn't have been thought of, including the Santiago Network, which is in itself an innovative instrument, and the Loss and Damage Fund and funding arrangements, which also creates a lot of firsts, because you need an instrument that can both address immediate needs, immediate humanitarian needs, but also address longer-term aspects of slow onset events. So marrying a single fund with a whole mosaic of funding arrangements and figuring out the complexity of how that would work. And none of this could have happened without the exercises that were done by the ExCom under the Warsaw International Mechanism. And so there's a lot of innovation that we've seen there. Now, as we move forward, I think it's good to introspect on all these lessons that we've learned, both from the material that has arisen from the conversations in the ExCom, but also from the modalities that have been used and have been refined over the years. But also, in introspecting, it's good to look forward. And looking forward, we have a different setup. We have an existing fund and funding arrangements that will need more than ever the technical input, the policy relevant input that can come from the ExCom under the Warsaw International Mechanism, and see how to answer the very difficult questions that actually have been exported by the Transitional Committee to the future board of the fund. And so the role of the ExCom now becomes ever more important with the creation of this scaling up of action and support. And also the world changes. There's more visible impacts, but also technology is advancing in ways that are faster than us being able to adapt to it, from artificial intelligence to everything else, availability of data, satellites, etc. How will the ExCom evolve to make use of this and to preempt the optimization of its work with the needs that will come up? I think now this formula of response to climate impacts is complete. We've had many years of supporting preemptive action, national adaptation plans, national adaptation programs, etc. Now we have the response part after an impact materializes. We have an optimized system of before and after, sort of. The financial mechanism, we have the policy relevant body. So it's a big integrated ecosystem of support in response to climate impacts, which then gets fed by insights, by information sharing platforms, by advice from the ExCom. And I think it's a very exciting time to be dealing with this work stream. And I hope that during this session we can come up with some of these ideas that will allow the ExCom to take it forward and generate the vision for the future. So thank you very much for being here, and back to you, Shiv.
Thank you very much, Yusuf. That was a very comprehensive history and a great primer and framing for our discussion today. And I think one of the words that really resonated with me throughout your description there and narrative was innovation, and how WIM has really been kind of pushing the boundaries there. Very fortunate to have Mr. Nabil Munir, the chair of the subsidiary body of implementation, with us. Just to say here that this body was instrumental in the establishment of the WIM 10 years ago. So, without further ado, Mr. Munir, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, dear colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, my apologies. I got to the wrong room, and it's a huge venue, so it just took me 20 minutes to walk here. It is truly an honor to have the opportunity to give these remarks as we gather here today to commemorate 10 years of the establishment of WIM. And it is really a distinct pleasure to do so as the chair of SBI. And as you said, considering the important role the SBI has played in institutionalizing the provisions for loss and damage under the UNFCCC process. And as some of you might know, loss and damages has a very special place in my heart, because last year, as it was approved and as Shamal Sheikh approved it, I was chairing the group of 77 in China, and we really pushed for it. And so this is, of course, one part of it, and that was the other part. So now we have the whole picture there. So it's really good that we had the decision yesterday, and we have, thanks to the presidency, over $500 million already pledged to it. So really a very good start to COP as well. Climate change is, I don't think it's worth repeating, but we still do repeat all the time, is the most urgent and critical challenge of our time. And human-caused climate change has already affected climate, weather and climate extremes in every region across the world. It is leading to widespread adverse impacts and related losses and damages to nature and to people. The growing gravity, scope, and frequency of climate hazards in all regions of the world is resulting in displacement, destruction, and invaluable cultural heritage and degradation of the essential ecosystem services on which our livelihoods depend. Against this backdrop, the Warsaw International Mechanism, since its establishment in 2013, continues to be the primary vehicle for the UNFCCC process for responding to loss and damage associated with climate change. In the last decade, WIM has also successfully established itself as a convener for engaging an extensive array of communities ranging from academics, civil society, intergovernmental organizations, UN agencies, regional centers, and private sector to channel knowledge and expertise in a coherent and coordinated manner to assist developing countries in responding to loss and damage. The establishment of the Santiago Network under the Warsaw International Mechanism is undoubtedly one of the most important developments of its first decade. The Santiago Network plays a critical part in the emerging landscape for enhanced support on loss and damage by catalyzing demand-driven technical assistance for the implementation of the relevant approaches on loss and damage at the local, national, and regional levels. Going forward, WIM and the work of the Executive Committee is more important than ever in bringing all the relevant players together for the furtherance of normative knowledge, practices, standards, principles, and guidance in the international space. The activities of the Executive Committee and its expert groups offer different modalities that gather data, information, expertise, and other resources with the objective of continually advancing the understanding from intellectual and practical perspectives on matters that perpetuate international cooperation on loss and damage. In closing, I would like to congratulate the Executive Committee, the members of the 5 thematic expert groups that support the committee's work, and most importantly, the parties who had the foresight of establishing an international mechanism to solidify international cooperation on loss and damage 10 years ago. And as I said in my opening remarks at the SBI plenary yesterday, we all expect a lot from COP28, but we are COP28. So each of us should expect more from ourselves. And what WIM has achieved in 10 years is great, but what is important even more is the next 10 years and what WIM can achieve during that time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Munir, and we hope that in the next 30 minutes, 40 minutes or so, we'll hope to hear a little bit more from everyone about what those next 10 years could possibly bring. A round of applause to our 3 panelists here who are now going to leave the floor, and we're going to welcome our 6 panelists who are going to be part of the next segment of our side event program today. So thank you very much. Please, you're welcome to come to the floor. Thank you very much. Thank you. So the next segment of our program today is divided into 2 sections. We're first going to hear from 2 panelists who I'll introduce in a second about how we got here. Please, all 6, please do take the floor. Thank you. How we got here, so looking back a little bit over what we've achieved in the last 10 years. And then the second segment, in which we'll hear from the remaining 4 panelists about where we go from here. And I really hope that we'll be able to open the floor for some questions on this very essential, timely topic. And then, of course, we'll then move to the after program as well. So I believe all 6 panelists are seated. So we'll hear from 2 of the panelists first. And in this first segment, as I said, we're looking back at the last 10 years. And with that, we have at the table Ms. Milagros de Camps, the Deputy Minister for Climate Change and Sustainability of the Dominican Republic. And we have Mr. Frode Niergaard, who is the co-chair of the Executive Committee of the Warsaw International Mechanism for Loss and Damage. So we're looking forward to hearing from you. And I've got a couple of questions for you, which I'm going to kick off with. And as I said, this section is really kind of looking at how we got here with the WIM. So maybe, Ms. de Camps, maybe looking to you first. What would you say has been the significance of establishing this international mechanism 10 years ago? Thank you.
First of all, I would like to say that I think we're all in very high spirits because yesterday marked a historic event in climate solidarity, and the international community took a significant step towards addressing the harm caused by climate change in our most vulnerable communities. And with the operationalization of the Loss and Damage Fund, at the same time that we commemorate the 10 years of the Warsaw International Mechanism for Loss and Damage, is a testament that we can achieve that when we act together in line with the principles of this convention, anything is possible. And I want to take also the time to thank you on behalf of the small island developing states for this milestone, and encourage us to embrace the opportunity to reflect back on the road that we have engaged to acknowledge the common responsibility in addressing losses and damages that result from the adverse effects of climate change. and that restate our commitment to continue rising to the challenge that the climate crisis presents. It's more than 30 years that have passed already since our colleagues from Vanuatu submitted a proposal on behalf of the Alliance of Small Island Developing States requesting the recognition for the loss and damage as an integral part of the convention, and SIDS countries have been unwavering in advocating for the recognition of loss and damage as a distinct and critical issue in climate negotiations, because we are very much aware that it poses an existential crisis to our ways of living. And while mitigation and adaptation are crucial pillars towards a transition to a sustainable economy, averting, minimizing, and addressing loss and damage is at the crux of ensuring our survival. And with the undoubtedly many successes through the WIM, we would like to also highlight the relentless work from the experts and the allied agencies and organizations that have supported the work so far, and on non-economic loss and damage to slow onset events and human mobility in the context of climate change, the ExCom delivered. And we are seeing so many results, and for example, with the operationalization of the task force on displacement, that we finally have a good space to discuss holistically human mobility in the context of climate change. And under the Fijian presidency, we also could welcome the Suva dialogue, which opened the door to the much-awaited path to financial support. And that has led to a historic day of yesterday's milestone to address loss and damage. I think for the moment I'm leaving it here, but we can continue.
We'll definitely hear more from you, Mr. Kamps. But Mr. Neergaard, you're obviously part of WIM. What would you consider has been the significance of establishing this mechanism 10 years ago, from your perspective?
Thank you very much for the question, and allow me to first thank all the audience being here, including current and former members of the Executive Committee. It's really great to see so many people have turned up, and I think the Executive Committee is a great constituent body. I'd like to make that comment, and allow me also to pay tribute to a good friend of many of us, Professor Salomon Cook, who I'm sure many of us know. Unfortunately, he is no longer with us and can't be here, and I think many of us are missing his energy and his determined fight for those at the forefront of climate change. And then turning to your question, I'd like to make two main points on what I think is the significance of establishing the international mechanism for loss and damage at COP19. We all know that responding to loss and damage is a challenge that requires multidisciplinary solutions. One of the fundamental functions of the Warsaw International Mechanism and of the Executive Committee in particular is their ability to mobilize and catalyze knowledge and expertise. It comes from a broad mix of expert organizations and networks beyond what exists in the climate change domain. Establishing the mechanism 10 years ago was a turning point. It enabled all relevant stakeholders to sit at the same table. It brought experience and tools from different communities of practice under one umbrella. This has led to collaboration with many organizations, bodies, networks, and experts. And it has contributed in implementing the three mandates that the parties entrusted the Executive Committee to carry out. And they are, very briefly, enhancing knowledge and understanding of comprehensive risk management approaches. And second, strengthening dialogue, coordination, coherence, and synergies among relevant stakeholders. And third, enhancing action and support to address loss and damage. So this was my first point. The second point is also very important. I want to highlight what I see as the role of the Executive Committee of Loss and Damage in detabooing loss and damage. The establishment of the Warsaw International Mechanism was the result of a recognition that loss and damage, and I quote from a COP19 decision, includes and in some cases involves more than that which can be reduced by adaptation. Its establishment with a clear mandate to implement 3 well-defined functions focusing on different aspects of relevance to responding to loss and damage was a real watershed moment, and it has helped advance the loss and damage agenda under the UNFCCC and beyond.
Thank you very much. You described there, Mr. Niergaard, the launch of WIM as a turning point. Coming back to you, Mr. Camps, we heard a little bit in your first intervention about how this particular topic is so essential for a small island state like yours. What would you consider has been the most significant contribution of the mechanism to date?
I think I already mentioned a few in my first intervention, but I would like to add to that even though we are aware that there are naturally some gaps in the WIM ExCom and they're spending work on non-economic losses and damages, particularly in understanding how SIDS way of life are affected. I know that there's much more than we could do still, but there's spaces that have been created for the first time where the convention can understand what really means in the communities to understand what losses and damages are and what the experiences are, not only about dollar numbers, and also on mitigation outcomes, but defining describing the actual impacts that losses and damages have on the most vulnerable communities, on women, on children, and I think that's one of the main achievements of the space.
Just out of interest, what has this kind of like elevation of the loss and damage up the kind of climate agenda meant for you as a country? What have been the implications of that for the Dominican Republic?
Yeah, well, losses and damages are, as a small island developing states, we have been experiences, and we can give you an example even last week where we had an extreme weather event happen of sudden flooding in the city of Santo Domingo that completely collapsed. And the same thing happened last year while we were also at COP in the same city in Santo Domingo. So these are not anecdotal events anymore. This is something that has been happening. And this type of spaces makes us, it gives us the tools to understand exactly those impacts. And for us, understanding the differentiated impacts on our communities and how it has, like I mentioned before, not only the impact on dollar numbers, that's something that has always been mentioned, but the different non-economic losses, the cultural losses, the losses to our livelihoods, the losses to the broad impacts that every one of these adverse effects has on small island developing states, but mostly on all vulnerable countries. So this type of spaces are extremely important, but we want to make sure that we have the alignment with the new loss and damage architecture, and that's something that's a priority. And we hope that this will come out of COP between the WIM ExCom and the Santiago Network for Loss and Damage. And this new fund that was created last COP and that was operationalized yesterday. So we do expect that we have a fully functional and supported WIM that is able to provide recommendations and that can be downscaled and adopted to our local context and translated into effective technical assistance.
Thank you very much. I mean, I think Yusuf was referring earlier to how, the conversation around loss and damage and adaptation, there was a certain tone of defeatism about it, that, it's almost, kind of claiming that the battle against climate change is lost. But I think what you're explaining there very sensitively is that, real people, real lives are on the front lines here. So thank you very much. Mr. Niergaard, turning to you, what would you consider the most important contribution of women in the last 10 years?
I guess as one of the two co-chairs of the executive committee, I'm a bit biased in highlighting how many impactful contributions I think that the WIM ExCom has made. I want to mention at least one, and if time allows, maybe I can say more. But I touched on earlier in my comment the importance of bringing together a diverse range of stakeholders. And in the last 10 years, the WIM has successfully engaged many communities of practice, ranging from academics, civil society, intergovernmental organizations, UN agencies, regional centers, and the private sector. And they bring all together the best available knowledge and expertise to assist governments and those at the front line of climate change. And also want to highlight the 5 thematic expert groups that others have also referred to, which the Executive Committee has established. And through these thematic expert groups, we are able to channel knowledge and expertise in all domains related to loss and damage in a coherent and coordinated manner. The resources we catalyze come from areas such as adaptation, disaster risk reduction, climate science and observations, insurance, humanitarian affairs, migration, development cooperation, ecosystem restorations, biodiversity conservation, cultural heritage preservation, and indigenous and local communities. The establishment of the Santiago Network has also enabled the mechanism to further strengthen its scope of technical assistance for developing countries in responding to loss and damage. And indeed also with yesterday's historic adoption of the establishment of a fund to promote new funding arrangements for loss and damage, a fund and new funding arrangements for loss and damage, I'm convinced that the mechanism will continue to play an important role in ensuring a well-coordinated approach towards loss and damage within the bodies under the Warsaw International Mechanism and beyond the Convention and the Paris Agreement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Niergaard. I've just seen in my notes that Ms. de Camps, you are a former member of the Transitional Committee, so my congratulations to you also for your work in getting the fund operationalised, because I know a lot of work took place on that over the course of the year, so as we've heard already in this session, so my congratulations to you.
Thank you very much. This was a very long road, but there are many responsible people here, and I think that we can all celebrate. We were all very emotional yesterday when the decision was taken, so we hope to see very good things, and we are seeing it already.
Thank you very much. Mr. Niergaard, just before we conclude this panel discussion, I just wondered if you could maybe, is there a way to kind of bridge the trajectories of what WIM has been working on over the last 10 years to this momentous decision that we saw yesterday, how the two kind of complement each other very briefly? How does that kind of link together there when we're talking about the significance of WIM?
I think that we have to turn to one of the 3 functions of the Executive Committee in responding to that. And as I mentioned, that's about strengthening dialogue, coordination, coherence, and synergies across the spectrum of the entities within the Warsaw International Mechanism. And I think, as Mohammed mentioned, we are now seeing a 3rd entity under the Warsaw International Mechanism developing through the decision or adoption of the decision yesterday. So we have the policy arm being the Executive Committee, we have the technical assistance arm of the Santiago Network, and now we have a financing mechanism as well. So I think that function is a very important one of the Executive Committee. I think I should also mention that looking at this in hindsight, there is no denying that the landscape of support on loss and damage has dramatically changed over the 10 years that we've seen since 2013. And I see the mechanism having contributed to this. Let me also briefly mention the breadth of work undertaken by the WIM ExCom, some of the knowledge product is not directly a response to your question, but I think it's important enough to mention here. We are currently updating the compendium on comprehensive risk management approaches. We're working on technical paper on non-economic losses, and we're developing 6 technical guides on covering key slow onset events and different aspects of human mobility in the context of loss and damage. And there are 6 theses being developed on this, and I think that also illustrates the role of the ExCom and how it can play this convening role among all the expertise. And you will see on the screen, I believe at some point here also, a QR code through which you can access some of these products or theses. So I wanted to make this announcement as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Niergaard. So you mentioned there, you've seen firsthand how much the landscape has changed with regards to loss and damage in the last 10 years. So what do the next 10 years hold from now? That will be the focus of our next panelist discussion. But in the meantime, let's please give a round of applause to Mr. Niergaard and Mr. Kamps for their contributions. Thank you. All right, in the second section of this panel discussion, we're going to talk about, yes, exactly what the next 10 years hold, what the future holds for loss and damage. And we're joined on the table by Mr. Manuel Pulgar Vidal. He's a global leader of climate and energy at the Worldwide Fund for Nature. As a former minister of Peru, Manuel was president of COP20, which was one of the milestone COPs for the WIM, where the composition of the ExCom was decided. We're also joined by Ms. Isabella Coziel. She is the Deputy Director General of the International Centre for Integrated Mountain Development. This particular organisation is very active on climate impacts in mountains, which is an important area of focus for the Executive Committee and its expert group on slow onset events. We're also joined by Mr. Andrew Harper. He's a special advisor on climate action to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. UNHCR is one of the member organisations of one of the expert groups of ExCom. He's on the task force on displacement, has been very active in driving the work forward. And finally, we're joined by Ms. Grace Balawag. She is the co-chair of the International Indigenous Peoples Forum on Climate Change. She is from the Mountain Province in the Philippines and also a member of the Friends Working Group of the Local Communities and Indigenous Peoples Platform. The FWG is a member of one of the expert groups of the ExCom and the expert group on non-economic losses. It's great to have you on the floor there. So as we kind of hopefully not looking too much into our crystal balls, because I hope that we've got some sense of where we're going with this, but maybe just to go to each of you individually. Mr. Manuel, why don't we start with you? What is your organisation, your stakeholders doing to address loss and damage? The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. And it couldn't have been better to celebrate the 10th anniversary of WIM that by adopting the operationalization of the loss and damage funding mechanism. That is fantastic. So let me avoid to repeat what it has been said by former panelists, but to try to understand loss and damage in the whole system. Because yesterday in an event, the president of WWF mentioned a very important phrase, Adil Nayam. Adaptation is showing our failure in mitigation. And loss and damage, it is showing the super failure in our mitigation effort. But also loss and damage, it is showing our failure in the economic system. And that is so important to be considered. And it is not that I am trying to avoid the question, but it is important when we think about loss and damage to insist on how much we have to double our effort in mitigation. Why we are insisting so much in the energy transition. Why do we need to take decisions on the phasing out of fossil fuels in this COP? Because it is the only way to at least start to think on the planet in a different way. So loss and damage, it is something that we have to focus on for sure, but we shouldn't forget the economic side of what we are trying to achieve in the current COP. But also let me make a reflection. So WWF is working on that. This is becoming a strongly economic process. And we have to understand those economic difficulties, but to insist in walking the transitions and promoting the economic, the shifting of the economic system. It is the only way, and we have to work on that. That moves me to a second reflection. There are some people who are starting to think that COPs are useless processes, that probably in these processes, no, we are not taking the decision with the speed needed to address what it is a current emergency. But look, in the former panel, in the introduction of this panel, of this session, we saw what it is important in this multilateral process. Somebody representing as Mohammed, the host country, the UAE, somebody represent as Yusuf, the Secretariat, the UNFCCC, and somebody representing a subsidiary body from where? From Pakistan, a country that is suffering strongly because of climate change. We saw, I think it was the last year or 2 years ago, how much Pakistan suffered because of floods and disasters in their own territory. So that is the virtue of the multilateral process. And that is something that we have to keep, that we have to continue insisting because it is the way in which we can get decisions. And I think that it was Yusuf that mentioned that loss and damage used to be 12 years ago, and also a bad word, even adaptation. But look, in Warsaw 2013, we got WIM, and then some years after that, the Santiago decision in Madrid, and finally in this COP, the funding mechanism, the operationalization of the funding mechanism. So I am all the time saying, and WWF is working on that, if we have enough courage, we can get things in COP. But to do that, we have to continually bring in mandates to negotiators. That is the only way. Because if we are going to expect just to have the mandate of the Paris Agreement, probably in 2 or 3 years, negotiators won't have anything more to say. So we do need to continue bringing new mandates, as it was with the WIM, to continue improving this system as it has been with loss and damage. But also this moves me to something that probably we have to consider more than non-economic loss and damage, more related to ecosystem damage, to nature damage, and to species. Because it is for sure about human beings, but also it is about ecosystems and nature, and that connect with health. So it is good that by now we are working in promoting convergence, in bringing nature more close to the climate debate. It is good that in the former year we got the Global Biodiversity Framework, and now we can promote and strengthen that link in between our nature objective toward a nature positive world by the 30 for 30 and all the targets of the GBF with our climate objective. Because by that we will address the non-economic loss and damage. But that is also related to health. We are used to forgetting that health it is an important element in this equation. In Lima, when I was president of the COP20, we really did, I think, great by bringing health, and by this COP we are expecting to have a strong outcome related to health. Because we have seen, because of pandemics, what it could mean not to address health in a good way. So also that is a topic in which we are currently working on. And I don't want to forget the importance of instruments as nature-based solutions. Nature-based solutions, it is an important tool for adaptation, but also it can move, and it can be an instrumental tool when we think about loss and damage. And MBS, it has been just adopted in the former COP as a formal instrument, and it is important, and WWF is working on that, to continue strengthening the role of nature and to have sustainable interventions on nature to address societal challenges. That means climate mitigation and adaptation, food security, water security, among many others. And Milagros, you mentioned about gender and children, and that is also something important that we have to strengthen in the agenda. So this is just to show how much when we think in loss and damage, we have to think on the whole system. Because I think it was, again, Yusef, that mentioned about the ecosystem of loss and damage. We have now the operationalization mechanism that we hope it has agility, it can guarantee access, that it is so important, and also it or must have a quick response. Because we know that who is paying actually loss and damage, it's people. And that is something that we have to recognize. The real fund of loss and damage, it is in the poorest people. So we have to create this mechanism with enough agility to have a quick response to what current people is suffering.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pulgar Vidal. I think your answer is really helpful there in helping to kind of frame loss and damage within all the different moving parts that we're going to be seeing. You know, it's interconnected to all of these different challenges, and I guess those also bring opportunities as well in the next 10 years ahead. And I think it's really helpful to get that kind of framing as we continue this discussion. So, Ms. Koziel, you work in a very specific kind of natural environment with mountains. What's your thinking there for the next 10 years ahead about the kind of challenges, opportunities that you see with loss and damage in that specific kind of ecosystem environment?
Yes, well, thank you. So just to explain, ICIMOD, we work for the 8 countries of the Hindu Kush Himalaya that stretches from Afghanistan in the west right through to Myanmar in the east. And we cover a region that actually is called the Third Pole. It contains the 3rd largest ice mass after the Arctic and the Antarctic. It is the source of Asia's 10 major rivers. It has 4 of the world's global biodiversity hotspots. And this enormous region supports up to 2 billion people living downstream. That's a quarter of the world's population. And yet this region is being hit extremely hard by the triple planetary crisis. That's climate change, biodiversity loss, and it's also one of the most polluted regions in the world. And just to flag that, we also know that our region is warming 2 times faster than other iced regions. And so you can just imagine what the consequences are of that. And unless we continue to really put pressure on decarbonisation, other forms of growth, the situation and the context for loss and damage is going to get extremely difficult. And just to give you a few facts, we know that this year alone, this monsoonal season, there have been 2,000 people who have lost their lives. You may have heard about the glacial lake outburst flood in Sikkim. That killed up to 100 people, 7,000 were displaced. It wiped out a major hydropower development, of course, putting risk at the transition to renewable energy. And we are facing these kinds of risks regularly. And of course, the science is telling us this is just going to get worse. And it's really the interplay of these risks that is extremely concerning. And when you think of when you have thawing permafrost, you have a flood, you have landslides, and you have these enormous catastrophic debris-filled floods that simply wipe everything out in the valleys that they travel down. Not to mention, of course, the slow onset events where we already know that our glaciers are melting 65% faster in the 2010s than the 10 years previously. When you go up to these landscapes, everywhere around you, you see glaciers that are not there anymore. You talk to forest rangers, you talk to herders, you talk to local people, they say in our lifetime, snow lines have gone up, the glaciers have gone. So, of course, why is this important? 2 billion people depend on the water from this region for energy, food, and livelihood. So what is the future? It's a difficult future, and I think we can't deny that. It's excellent to hear the fantastic progress yesterday, but we still need to do a lot more. So our organisation, we are really working hard to get a better understanding of risk and to support our countries to monitor risks more effectively. For example, we know that in Nepal there are 47 potentially dangerous glacial lakes. Out of those, 2 are being regularly monitored. Sikkim, the event that I mentioned earlier, that was being monitored, but somehow the information didn't get through to us. So really working to understand, monitor these risks, but also do the economic assessments of those risks. Secondly, really working, our previous speaker mentioned nature-based solutions, building the resilience of these mountain communities and downstream. Also to protect the investments, we're looking at how can we deploy nature-based solutions with disaster risk reduction, how we can install more effective community-based early warning systems. Of course, all that we do is really small compared to the size of the region that I've just highlighted. And finally, regional cooperation. No single country can solve these challenges alone. Many of these risks move across borders. We need to really focus also on working together as a region and cooperating as a region. And finally, of course, advocating globally for the need to really speed up the energy transition. We cannot underemphasize this enough. I really like that term that loss and damage is a super failure. I think we really need to think hard about that and push, as we are also lobbying and pushing in our own small way for decarbonisation. The crisis is real, it's there, it's happening, it's going to affect millions of people. Loss and damage is great, but we're going to need an awful lot of money to solve that. So that's my picture of the next 10 years. Thank you.
Thanks, Isabella. I think that's a kind of quite a troubling picture you point there, but I hope there's also a call for action in there as well. And let's also hope that the loss and damage fund being operationalized, really kind of powers through a new kind of era of international solidarity. I mean, you were speaking there about regional and international collaboration in tackling, climate impacts, and let's really hope that this fund can accelerate some more of that sentiment. But yeah, it's really helpful to get that reality check. Mr. Harper, we're going to turn to you, and obviously you come from UNHCR. That's where you're currently working, and we often hear the term climate refugees, which I think is also in a way kind of linked to the many kind of issues related to loss and damage. Where do you see things going in the next 10 years? Are climate refugees going to become a lot more common? Is this something that we're going to see? Are you also pessimistic, or what gives you reason for hope, if anything?
Thanks. Good to start with the term climate refugees. That's to get me going. In terms of overall displacement, so obviously, like UNHCR is coming from the refugee side of things, which is not necessarily just climate refugees. Like, if that term actually exists, like what we're seeing is that there's going to be, and there is already, there's a huge increase in the numbers of people who've been displaced in the context of a changing climate. So we're like that causality can be questionable, but what we are seeing is that global warming is leading to increased competition over resources, whether that be land, whether that be water, whether that be challenging of livelihoods, and that's leading to conflict. So climate change is driving displacement, is driving conflict, and this is why it's so important that we start getting a handle on adaptation issues, and if we can't ensure that there's sufficient adaptation, then you're going to be having more loss and damage. So if you look at 10 years ago, the number of people who were displaced that were of concern to UNHCR was about 40 million people. Now it's about 115 million people. And so is the situation, as been expounded time and time again, going to become even worse? Of course it is. So we've got a choice of either investing in adaptation seriously or looking to deal with the consequences. And even like, it's great to have $500 million or whatever it's been, but this is nothing compared to the costs that we're being confronted with. And so while UNHCR is here and we obviously very much engaged on the refugee side, we can't do this by ourselves, and nor should we be doing it by ourselves. And this is why I think the WIM is so important. It brings this diverse degree of stakeholders together. And I see friends from PDD and IOM and IDMC, obviously Mirwa from WIM have been helping bring this together. But there's probably been too much of a fixation on what we can't do and not enough on what we need to be doing. And so it was a very good sort of reference at the start in terms of the fact that the Loss and Damage Fund is the operational side of things. The WIM brings people together. We've got the Santiago network as far as the technical side of things. But we still don't have that sense of urgency. And I think what the WIM needs to probably be doing is bringing more of the people to the forefront, making sure that they are the conveners of loss and damage. So at the moment, there's a lot of people here from capitals, but there's not very many people here who are from the affected communities. And I think that's what's going to be key, because we can't be seeing people from the affected communities as being just victims. Like, we often refer to affected communities being on the front lines. They're more than that. They're at the forefront. They don't have the resources, they're being neglected, and they have to do what they can possibly do to adapt. But you can't just leave them in this increasingly tenuous and debilitating sort of environment. We know what the science is telling us. So the answer is pretty clear when you say, what's the situation going to be in the next 10 years? It's going to be what we make it. We can either do very little, which is what we're currently doing, or we can be much more serious and change the systems and be much more collaborative. We've got to move away from saying this population is displaced, this population is refugees, this population is vulnerable. We have to be looking at overall human security. We have to start looking at displacement in a wider context. Friends from IOM be obviously looking at the migration side, but unfortunately there's going to be locations in the world which won't be habitable in the future. So we're also going to have to look at planned relocation. So these are the types of things that we need to start looking, what does the operationalisation of the Loss and Damage Fund actually mean, and how does it fit within the other funding mechanisms, not as a humanitarian response, but as a human rights response as well. Like, to neglect the human rights of people when we know that they're going to be under increasing threat is just pure negligence. So we can celebrate what was achieved yesterday, but that was yesterday. Let's move on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew Harper. I guess what you're saying there is that we're at a crossroads where, you know, it's really up to us to make of this what we will. So yeah, I think it's a real call to action that this problem isn't going away anytime soon, regardless of the decision yesterday, as momentous as it was. We're going to come to Miss Grace Balawag. You're from an indigenous community in the Philippines. What's the link there between indigenous people and loss and damage as we look ahead to the next 10 years? We hear more and more about the importance globally of indigenous people and the knowledge and custodians of nature. How do we tap into that resource moving forward, and how do you see the next 10 years?
Okay, thank you very much for inviting us here, for the opportunity to articulate the voice and perspectives of indigenous peoples in this commemoration of the 10th anniversary of the WIM. And yeah, as co-chair of the Indigenous Peoples Forum on Climate Change, we really strive to unite our voices and to articulate this in global processes like the UN FCCC COP. And of course, we want to share how we are being impacted with this loss and damage due to climate change. Yes, of course, as we all know, this encompasses both economic and non-economic effects to our communities, to our culture, and of course to our mental and spiritual well-being. And I have, in the last WIM ExCom meeting held in Manila early this year, I think, I have shown the voices. I have shown the voices and sharing of stories by our indigenous peoples communities. As you all know, in the Philippines, we experience more than 20 cyclones or typhoons every year. And we have, I think, we have built a level of resilience and how to cope up with whatever impacts this has caused for us, for our local communities, for our indigenous peoples communities as well. And yeah, yes, and our approach, we showed our approach in how we address these challenges that we face every year, especially in the Philippine experience. And of course, globally, we have this facilitative working group on the local communities and indigenous peoples platform. It's an opportunity for us to share experiences and how we have been utilizing or maximizing our traditional knowledge systems, the customary governance systems, as well as our cultural practices in coping up with all of these. We come from diverse ecosystems, from the Arctic to the tropical forests, and but still we have common traditional knowledge practices, experiences that we share together to build more our collective solidarity within amongst our indigenous peoples from different regions. We also have been engaging in this global effort to address climate change. We have been actively participating and contributing, especially in the workshops as well as the meetings of the Transitional Committee, in putting in place some of the indigenous people's concerns in this decision that was recently adopted, and we are we congratulate everybody for having that adopted already of the new session. Of course, we try very much to restore our connectivity with nature, and we build our resilience because we are people dependent on nature, and most of our adaptation, mitigation, as well as in addressing loss and damage depends on the various ecosystems wherein we really build knowledge systems intergenerationally, locally, as well as at the global level. We understand that to address loss and damage, it's really quite a challenge for us, indigenous peoples who are also considered as vulnerable communities, but at the same time, we believe that we are contributing to much through our traditional knowledge systems practices in responding and in contributing to the climate change solutions that we are facing. So I think we continue to do that maybe in the next generations. That's why we are building the capacities of our younger generation to really continue on with our traditional knowledge systems and practices on how we have built resilience and our capacities to be coping up with all of these impacts of climate change. And
Thank you very much, Miss Grace Balawag. I think what really kind of stood out for me there is, the way you're utilizing, the traditional knowledge systems and passing them through the generations to kind of build capacity, to strengthen resilience, and ensuring the longevity of these really valuable skills and practices that have really told the tale of time and survived for so many generations. Bit mindful of the time because I also want to leave a short window open for questions. So I'm going to come to four of you for a quick, rapid round of question and a 1 minute succinct answer, please. The question that I have to you is that you've all painted a story looking into the next 10 years. We've also heard in the previous session about how far WIM has come and bringing the loss and damage agenda forward. So in 1 minute, each of you, please. We'll start with you, Mr. Manuel Pulgar Vidal. How do we tap into the potential of the WIM in the next 10 years based on the challenges, the opportunities you see in the path ahead?
Let me add something to what it has been discussed or shared by the panelists. Two important things for the future. We are used to thinking that this is a political process. It is, it's economic, it's social. But I am used to forgetting something that it is so important to bring back. This must be a moral process. And loss and damage, it is bringing that moral side. It's an ethical process. It must be an ethical process. And let me, in this minute, bring back what Grace has just mentioned. Voices. Loss and damage, it is the way to give back voice to who are losing voices. That is so important because it is moving decision makers, it is moving politicians to recognize that people is suffering and that we have to act. And if we are able to keep that message alive, we can really improve, strengthen the loss and damage mechanism.
Thank you very much.
1 minute.
Yeah, very good. Very impressed. Ms. Isabella Coziel.
Yes, I also would like to second that. It is a moral and ethical question for us, and it's so important to find the mechanisms to get the finance to the people who are bearing the brunt of these damages, whether they're on the front line or at the forefront. We are not very good at that, even whether it's talking about adaptation funds or development funds. Can we harness the power of digital tech? Then there are many new innovations now. Let's use them, let's get that money to where it really needs to get to. Secondly, the finance. Innovative sources of finance. Can we do more to think about how can we repurpose subsidies? Before this meeting, I was just looking, cost of support measures for fossil fuels doubled in 2022 from the preceding year. How can we repurpose those subsidies into the loss and damage fund? Big question. And finally, don't forget about mountains. These are extremely fragile regions. They have such enormous regional and global implications, whether it's downstream or global sea level rise. So put mountains in the front and centre. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Andrew Harper, the floor is yours.
So within the minute, I think we have to be serious in terms of what can the WIM do? And there's limits because it's made up of stakeholders. But what it can do is be sort of like the honest broker. It can be sort of keeping an oversight in terms of creative accounting, which will come about in terms of these pledges. The 500 million, when will be pledged? Are they loans? Are they grants? Will they actually get to the people who actually need them? We know that with adaptation financing, it's actually been going backwards. So we need to be the honest broker. We also need, what does available financing mean? What does affordable financing mean? What does accessible financing mean? And on top of that, I'd be sort of adding to what the fellow speakers have been saying in terms of what is equity? What does social justice mean? What does solidarity mean? And these, like, we've moved a long way over the last 10 years, but now we've got to make sure that we do deal with the equity, the climate justice, and the solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you. Grace Balawag.
Yes. Yes, of course, the UNFCCC, including the WIM, plays a crucial role in really developing or enhancing actions in response to in addressing loss and damage. And for indigenous peoples, we would like to still to reiterate that all of these responses and actions should be built on the framework of human rights-based approach. And of course, in deepening their engagement with our traditional knowledge systems, our practices, and contributions that we have been making over generations. And we would like to say that this was proven as well in the report of the IPCC, that we are contributing much to whatever climate change solutions through our indigenous people's knowledge systems, our value systems, and through solidarity and reciprocity with all the other communities that we are working with. We need, of course, direct support in terms of resources, technologies, innovations that are appropriate to our situation, and we encourage more direct support for indigenous peoples and local communities from all of the regions that we are and all the ecosystems that we have been sustainably managing for the past years. So I think that's my response for that.
Thank you. I mean, thank you also for keeping more or less the time there with your 1 minute rapid response answers, and I'm hoping we can keep that sentiment as we just move to a brief window for questions and answers. I'd just maybe like to take a couple of questions together that we can put to the panelists just to open up the floor a little bit. So please, this is your moment. If anyone has any questions in the room. I see a hand there. Is there a mic? Yep. Do we have any other questions in the room? And then we'll come to this gentleman as well. I'll take the two questions together.
Good evening. This is me, Mona Bulgasim from Sudan. Did you find the compensation of the communities that have a catastrophic climate change is fair for them? The mechanism of loss and damage. And also I want to ask another question. Can we classify the people in the area of conflicts and wars? They deserve the compensations of loss and damage? Thank you.
And this gentleman here, please.
All right. Hi, my name is Jake. I'm from the United States. I just wanted to ask, where do you see how can we encourage the process of recovering from loss and damage to be more accessible to everyone, more open? Because as we see the worldwide, in general, sometimes often in many different disasters, it's very hard to evacuate everybody, especially if there's like a hurricane or typhoon or cyclone or anything like that pending. Often in some countries, the answer is shut down the public transit system, just have everybody evacuate by car. Wouldn't it be a wise idea in order to mitigate loss and damage by making the evacuation plans, if people have the chance to evacuate, more accessible, and how can we go about doing that?
Okay, we'll just take one question there as part of this group, and then these are the panelists.
Hello, everyone. My name's Emily Boyd. I'm from Lund University. I have one question, and maybe each panelist can just respond to it shortly. But I would love to know what you think about what should be the underlying principles guiding the new Loss and Damage Fund to ensure that it remains focused on the ethical and moral imperatives that you pointed out, and who and how should those standards be set?
All right, so we had 3 questions here for the panelists, and please raise your hand. We'll take them just quickly one by one. There's a question about the conflict, and okay, so Manuel, I see you want to take that one. Making evacuations more accessible, the evacuation process. Arthur, yep.
I'll do the conflict one.
The conflict one as well, okay. And the evacuation one. Okay, we can maybe come back to that. And on standards, I believe, as well. Can you take us to that? No? Okay, we'll see how we get on. On the conflict then.
Well, I think, just again, trying to keep within a minute or two, that there's such an increasing correlation between, or causality between climate and conflict. Competition over resources, over land, challenges over livelihoods, but that doesn't mean it's an exact science. It just means that we have to be working in a much more, consistent manner to understand where adaptation has not occurred, and that lack of adaptation may have led to consequences which have led to conflict. 60% of the world's refugees and displaced persons originate from countries that have got the least capacity to adapt and being impacted by climate change. If you look at the situation in places like Somalia or Afghanistan, people are fleeing due to a combination. It may be because of Boko Haram, it may be because of other types of wars, but it's also due to drought, poor governance and other issues. So it's a tricky area to get involved in, but it's something which we need to be taking into account. But there is loss and damage linked to conflict? Yeah, absolutely. Like, there's probably no better example of people who have suffered due to the impacts of climate change and other elements than, say, refugees that have been forced to move from their homes, lost everything, their futures in doubt. So I'd be sort of pushing, particularly for refugees and IDPs, internally displaced persons, to be included within the parameters. Thank you.
Manuel, yes?
Yeah, I would like to go to the second.
Yep.
If it's possible. Because we are taking global decisions. The funding mechanism is a global decision. The WIM 10 years ago, it was a global decision. But we are used to forgetting the domestic action. And Isabella, you mentioned it in your intervention, that we have the mechanism, but sometimes we don't have or the ability or the will to develop projects, to put something in front of that fund, to get access to that fund. And sometimes that is part of a political situation. Politicians are not used to recognizing the situation because it can affect their political reputation. So most of the time they are talking about extraordinary events, phenomena, when it is a regular event. Climate change, it is creating regular events that are affecting us, and also that can change our way of life. So we have to go into our government and demand, and also demand to allocate budget, demand to recognize the current situation that we are suffering in our own country. And that could warrant access to the process and access to the money. Have you already wondered how many of your countries have already access to the Green Climate Fund? Probably not too many. Are the usual suspects, always, because we are not developing our own. So I am used to thinking, okay, let's continue taking decisions in the global arena, but immediately let's move back into our own countries to demand our politicians our decision makers. If not, it will be business as usual.
Thank you very much. We are kind of running out of time, but those questions that were not unanswered yet, this is your invitation to come to the reception, and perhaps you can corner our panelists and maybe get the answers that you'd like. But look, let's wrap up the discussion here. Maybe just to kind of conclude, I think we've had a really, really fascinating and very insightful discussion on what is a very hot and timely topic at the moment, given yesterday's decision and also the way loss and damage continues to rise up the climate agenda. I mean, some of the words that I've heard and have really resonated with me is over the last 10 years how WIM has really kind of been breaking the ground, driving the momentum to loss and damage, which in one ways yesterday's momentous agreement is perhaps even a kind of product there, and you can draw a line from 2013 and to there. Looking ahead, we hear about how WIM is the convener. That's how it's kind of kind of drawn its process kind of over the last kind of 10 years, and that's the kind of trajectory it's looking to go ahead in uncertain times, right? We heard about the kind of crossroads that we find ourselves with loss and damage, how we have a very promising situation with the fund having been agreed, but how it's up to us to make of that and something that can really deliver opportunities and it's really a kind of a matter of life and death for people on the ground, as we heard from our friend here, from Minister De Camps from the Dominican Republic, and also from the mountains. So I'll leave it there. I'd like to now give Mr. Neergaard the floor to invite us to the photo exhibition opening, just to make a quick announcement about that. The floor is yours.
Indeed. And on behalf of the Executive Committee of the Warsaw International Mechanism, dear colleagues and friends, it's a great pleasure and honor for me to officially declare openly Loss and Damage in Focus, 10 year of the Warsaw International Mechanism photo exhibition. And we sincerely hope that you will have the opportunity to pass by room 9 in the next weeks. And please go there and pause in front of the 20 striking photos we have selected and reflect on the stories that tell how individuals and communities on the front line of climate change from many different parts of the world are responding to climate change and the resourcefulness and determination of their actions. The selected photographs you will see exhibited are a sample of the many more that we have received through the call for interest that we launched at SB 58, and which we have disseminated widely over the course of the summer months. We have featured all of the entries we have received in an online photo gallery, and we hope that many of you will have the chance to visit during this COP and beyond. And I think I should add that this is all about people, and this is what these photographs are showing. And I think we need to be mindful also, given the questions we had here now, people at the front line are those that suffer. It's for those people that we are working in the Executive Committee of the Warsaw International Mechanism, and I hope you'll see that illustrated through the photos in the exhibition near room 9. And I was just passing there before I came to this side event, seeing people going there and ensuring that they are leveled all the 20 photographs, so they are finally aligned there, because I think when people are walking past, they are kind of a little bit wobbling there, but they are very nicely displayed right now, so please go there and have a look.
Thank you.
It's in the main hall where you find the meeting rooms and one of the plenary on the south side there. And just go down the lobby, the big lobby where you have the meeting rooms, and turn to your right down at the bottom. They are a little bit hiding there near room 9, but you will find them as you go into that building. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So
Let's please
the
give...
exhibition is officially launched.
It's officially launched. There we go. And a round of applause also to our 6 panelists who really delivered some fantastic insights to loss and damage today. Just a quick word about the reception, which I've been referring to at various points this evening. So there'll be 3 people, I'm told, will be here from the catering service to direct you to the location. This is